This is chapter 10, set A number 2. It tells us for men age 18 and over in the Haynes study, we have an average height, their SD, the average weight, the SD of the weight, the correlation. So we want to estimate the average weight of the men whose heights were, and we're going to do this 4 times. Okay. First thing, I always write down the information they give me, but they already did that nicely here. Okay, so next thing, figure out what's X and Y. So we want to estimate the weight. Whatever you want to estimate, that's your Y. Not necessarily what comes second, but what you actually want to estimate. So I'm going to label it X and Y. Now to use the regression method, again, there's not formulas for these. You're just supposed to be using steps of logic. I realize it'd be easier if we wrote out formulas, but it's hard to write a technical formula without a lot of subscripts and things that are going to make it too difficult for this class. But there are 3 steps we're always going to follow. First one is find the Z value. So we're going to do Z equals X minus the average over the standard deviation. We want to know how many standard deviations is X from the average, which is what Z tells us. We're going to do this with all of our information that they gave us for Z. We don't care about Y at the moment, we're just looking at X's. So the X that we're interested in, let's do this part A first. So we'll do 69 is my X value, minus the average, which also actually happens to be 69, so that might be slightly confusing, divide by the standard deviation of 3. So in this case, we're just going to get 0. 2, we're going to find Z times R, because we realize instead of using the SD line, we get better predictions overall for most of our points if we multiply Z by R. So our R is 0.41, so we're going to do 0.41 times our correlation, which was, Z, let me do it in the same order. Z was 0, so we'll do 0 times our correlation of 0.41, which still happens to give me 0. Now step 3, we're going to find our Y. Basically, we're going to reverse the Z formula. Okay. So Z times R tells you how many standard deviations Y should be from its average. So Y should be 0 standard deviations from the average. Or in other words, we could do Y equals like our average plus something times the number of standard deviations. So the something here is going to be that Z times R that we found in step 2. So the average of Y is 42 plus the Z times R, which we found is 0, times my standard deviation. My average was 190 plus 0 times the standard deviation, which was 42, which gives me 190. Now that makes sense because we know that our regression line passes through the point of averages. So if we're looking at the X average, the line should go through the Y average, so it should be 190. Well, that's how we find all the steps for it. So we're always going to find a Z value using all of our X values. Then we'll find Z times R, and then we'll reverse that Z formula to get to Y. So Y is going to be the average plus that Z times R times the standard deviations. Okay, let's try it for part B for 66 inches. So step 1, we'll find our Z value. Z is going to be equal to our X minus the average over our standard deviation. So we'll do 66 minus the average. So now we're talking about just our X values. So we'll do the 69 and 3 for the standard deviation. So 66 minus 69 over 3 gives me -1. So that means my X value is 1 standard deviation below the average. 2, we're going to find Z times R. So Z was -1. My correlation was 0.41, which equals -0.41. So we're going to expect the Y to be about -0.41 SDs below its average. Again, we use that times R because we just get better predictions. 3, we're going to find Y. Y is going to be equal to our average plus that Z times R that we found in step 2 times the standard deviation. So let's see, my average for Y is 190 plus a -0.41 times the standard deviation of 42. which gives me 172.78. So the logic here says y should be negative 0.41 standard deviations above the average. Or we'll just say like from the average. So logically, then they want you to come up with step 3. If you're not coming up with step 3 logically, then you can kind of write down this little formula that I just showed you. So it'd be the average plus however many standard deviations you're supposed to be from the average. Okay, repeat that again for the other numbers.